Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Walsh. I am a film critic at the Tribune News Service, and I will be moderating this discussion about Black Box Diaries for my blind and low vision attendees. Just to describe myself, I am a white woman. I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt. I also have headphones on, and I'm sitting in my living room. And please welcome my guest, the director of Black Box Diaries, Shiori Ito. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Shiori Ito. I'm a director of Black Box Diaries. I'm an Asian woman with long hair. I'm wearing red tomato-like color shirt, and I'm sitting in a hotel room next to the white bed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your film with us and being here tonight to talk about the film as well. I wanted to go back to the beginning, which I know is a very long time ago, because, it was a long process for this film to get made and also the journey that you've been on so far. But the incident took place in 2015, and in the 2017 press conference that we see in the film, you talk about sort of treating this as an investigator, as a journalist, and taking on that identity as a way to deal with it. But I'm curious when you decided to start recording, to capture things on video, to capture yourself on video, not just a writing process, but to start filming things as well.
Yes, thank you. So 2015, I was sexually assaulted. It's almost 9 years ago, and it took me 5 days to go to police. In Japan, we have quite the culture of stigma against sexual violence. So it took some time to me to decide to go to report to police. Um, but I guess I was just naive that if I go to police, they will just report my case and start investigation. But it wasn't the case. So I have to push. I have to try to think about the way they can investigate. But at some point, I wasn't really sure if they were doing their job. And and later on, I was very skeptical that if they even want to take the case, or maybe they're avoiding in some reason. So I decided to recording our conversation to protect myself. So that started. So first couple of years was just purely recording by myself, mainly audio, but I also did a bit of iPhone diary. I don't think I was thinking about making the documentary at the time, but towards to the press conference 2 years later in 2017, I start feeling not sure if I would be safe to go public because I was naming um, the person who assaulted me, and I felt like he had some power connection with Prime Minister. So I just decided to do leaving all the document what I had to say just in case something could happen. But now I'm looking back, and I can you know feel like and laugh like that was maybe me being paranoid, but that time I wasn't really sure what I was going through. So that's how I started.
So, you obviously wrote the book, and we see that process of you writing the book and releasing the book in the film. I'm curious when the idea to make a film as sort of a companion piece, or maybe it seems like it's probably a completely different project because it follows things that happen after the book comes out. But when did the idea for directing a film come about in this process for you?
Yeah, so book I published about uh, about the same time when Me Too happened in the US,
Hmm.
when it was reported. And so for me, it was about like 3, 4 months after I went public. I did that because, well, one of the reasons why I want to speak about my experience, to public was I realized that the at that moment the rape law was 110 years old. The law was set when women didn't even have voting rights. So I felt like I needed to put the pressure, and it changed a little bit. 2 weeks later, I spoke to public, but it was really minor change that finally male victim can report the rape.
Wow.
So it wasn't really changing the part that to prove the rape you need consent. That wasn't the idea of our law that time. So I felt like I need to write about it through my experience. And so yeah, that was how I did it. And so that time I was still going through the court case as well. So I was writing as trying to be more journalistic. I didn't put any emotion in it, nothing that much about point of view as a survivor. Um, and also I guess I couldn't associate my emotion that time because it was too much to carry. So in a way, being a journalist give me some good distance to face my case. And but after I went public, I got quite big online backlash and troll, and I couldn't work anymore in Japan. And then this Swedish journalist reached me out. At the time, she was living in London, and she had a Japanese friend, and she got to know what happened to me. So they told me that I should move to London and think about how we can highlight this case, trying to cover from outside, and that's how we did it. And I had many recordings and iPhone videos, so it was a good start to pitch the story to London-based media, and we decided to go back together to film together. But first, we didn't have any commission, so she was literally like being my human shield, saying Swedish, no one can harm Swedish human rights. So it was really amazing that someone really believed to speak about this issue, and she was from far away, from Japan. So mainly she wasn't a cameraman, but she filmed most of the footage at that time.
And, I was thinking a lot about what it meant for you to come forward, to show your face, to become a public figure and the face of this movement in Japan. And then how making the film, you're sharing yourself so vulnerably, your emotions, the highs and lows. Um, were you more nervous for the book or the film to come out? I mean, they seem like, it's obviously about similar topics, but you're sharing yourself in a different way.
Yeah, well, definitely I was more nervous when I was publishing book because that, remember it was still 2017,
Yeah.
and it was me
Yeah.
before to movement. So especially in Japan, no one heard why would you share such a shameful experience. So I still remember right after I published my book, I start hearing this amazing news breaking out from States, and I felt like I'm not alone. And I think Japanese media also start reporting that was happening. And it's been 7 years, 8 years since that movement happened. I feel like we start understanding the systematic issue around sexual violence. So for now, it was easier to talk about what happened to me, but it was difficult in a way because in the film, I decided to face myself as a survivor, and I have to share more vulnerable part that I didn't do in the book. So it was quite different phase. Um, so in that way, that was different. But I feel like thanks to all the women who share their story, how they change what was happening, in their background. So that made me really helpful to bring this new film out to the world.
Mhm. And what has the reaction been in Japan to this film coming out? Have there been any changes to the law? Um, have people felt like they can share their stories? Are there any changes in sort of the power dynamics, the police? Obviously, we see what happened, the text at the end of the screen of the film, but since then, have there been any updates?
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to make a film is because I wanted to tell this story in Japan, because it is difficult to talk about sexual violence in my case. Um, and unfortunately, we haven't yet distributed or screened it in Japan.
Oh, okay.
And it's a bit surprising to me that we kicked off our premiere at Sundance RE this year in January, and we've been traveling around the world with this film in different, film festival. Right now, I'm in China in Pinyao, but still, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that in Japan. So I wish I could know and tell you the reaction, but yeah, I don't know that yet. But I can tell you, after 7 8 years, um since 2017, there are more stories we hear and there are more stories we see in the news. So that has changed. And last year, there were another rape law update that our age of consent used to be 13 years old, which was, yeah, too young, and we don't even have a education of, consent, sex for sex. But not now, it's 15 years old, so it's like, slightly older.
Slightly,
So that's
slightly, yeah, baby
there.
steps. I did want to talk about some of the storytelling choices in the film, the way you kind of lay out some of the information. I thought it was very interesting that your testimony of what happened during the incident comes quite late in the film. So, we see some of the CCTV footage. We see, and I'm sorry to like make you talk about this again. But we see the footage in the beginning of the film, we hear from the driver, and then your memory comes much later. I'm curious, so much of the film is focused on you, going after the police and trying to get answers as to why they won't prosecute, why they won't arrest him. Um, but I thought it was just a really interesting choice to have that testimony sort of come a little bit later.
I
Was that
think,
just having to do with, like, the suit? Like, because 'cause you're reading it in the civil suit?
yes, that scene is chronologically speaking, that was around that time. But of course, um we could have, put what happened to me in details in that towards the beginning, but I didn't want to do that because I've been suffering from stereotyping against towards to victims, and I just didn't want people to have the information visually detailed in the beginning, because that could
Yeah.
be, very biased to everyone. And also, uh, I had to close the line as a journalist to tell this story in the film. It's one-sided story. It's my story. It's not the story of the guy who the offender. So I just felt like I needed to talk about what happened after, because if um, legal system worked okay, if the police worked correctly, um, then I didn't have to write a book or make this film. So for me, main focus was about what happened after.
Yeah, and it is about critiquing those systems of power and, how do you report and do people take you seriously and the laws and, the systems that protect predators. So I just thought that was a really fascinating storytelling choice. Also
Yeah,
just in terms oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Well, I think one more thing that was important to me was to not re-traumatize audience
Yeah.
who ever experienced it. I didn't want to use any visual to tell the story um, that we often see when with the film of sexual violence. And this story has been told by a third person, and maybe for them, it's they think necessary or easier to tell the story with more details of visuals, but it's not necessary to do that. So that was something I want to make sure so that the audience, whoever been through something similar, don't have to feel yeah uh, I didn't want to trigger anyone as well. So that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. Um, you're condensing 7, 8 years into an hour and 45 minutes. Was there anything that you knew that you had to include or anything that you are upset that you weren't able to also put into the film? Like, what were you focusing on that was like had to be in there?
It is we had a footage of 430 hours.
Oh my god.
So I know we did a good job to make it into 100 minutes. But I think more difficult question for me was how much emotion it is okay to include as the
Mm-hmm.
director, as the character, um, and that balance. For me, the editing time was the most difficult time because when we were recording, things were happening at the time. So we were really just truly like covering story or just, Hannah, the producer, the Swedish journalist, became my friend. So I didn't really feel like we were making film or she was recording, filming. She didn't give me that impression. So yeah, editing process was the most difficult part. There were so many scenes that I wish I talked to my with my editor if we should include or not, thinking maybe this is too emotional, um, too much. But then also I had to treat the story as I'm telling someone else story too. So first I was um really try to take out all the emotions or me speaking to camera. Um, I didn't want to have that kind of footage, but in the end of the day, I had to circle back again and again, thinking, if I were telling someone else's story, what do I do to try to treat the story, hoping, yeah, to see, I don't know, bit distance. But then, of course, my perspective was important. So um, in the end, I didn't feel that during I was making the film, but now I can tell that it was all therapeutic. Um, I feel it was needed for me as well.
And what has it been like, premiering at Sundance and then sharing this with a more global audience, continuing to share this story, be an advocate, talking to people who, are affected by this film. I mean, what has your experience been like sharing it, with a wider audience?
This is my first feature documentary, and before I've been only working on textbook, short documentary film for TV or online platform. So I never have seen the audience right after they experience the film. And it's really powerful. What I hear, what I see, their emotions, their expression, realizing also how many people have been through, um, or someone, you know, they love. I can feel that they're carrying something similar. And what I love about sharing that in a cinema is like I feel like it's the safe place. You might not know who's sitting next to you, but you're there to inhale and witness, and also maybe reflect on yourself. So that has been really amazing experience. And at the same time, I have to be honest with you, it's been a lot for
Mm-hmm.
me as well. I am getting also um yeah, other stories. um People start sharing their story, and I am really grateful to hear and notice that's happening around the world. But it's been quite a lot as well. But as a journalist, I always want to hear what's going on in different places. But it's always very similar story when it comes to sexual violence, and very universal.
Mm-hmm. Well, your work is so important. This is such an important film. I hope everybody who needs to see this film is able to see it. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your film with us and for sharing a little bit more of yourself with us. And I think for both of us and for the audience, we should do as you instruct in the beginning of the film, which is to just take a deep breath. And so thank you, Shiori. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.